In a monarchy defined by centuries of rigid tradition, one act has sent shockwaves through the royal corridors. Prince William has made a decision so daring, so unthinkable, it threatens to rewrite the very script of royal succession, and he's doing it all for Catherine. But why now? And what does this mean for King Charles? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. When the first whispers emerged from within Kensington Palace, no one wanted to believe them. Prince William, heir apparent, groomed from boyhood to uphold the institution, was allegedly orchestrating a plan to elevate his wife Catherine to the throne before the throne was even his, not in name only, not in future promise, but in full, symbolic recognition. In private, palace aides were stunned. They pored over decades-old constitutional guides, grasping for precedent. There was none. What William was proposing wasn't merely unorthodox. It was revolutionary. A future king attempting to bestow the crown prematurely upon his consort wasn't just a personal gesture, it was a direct challenge to centuries of royal order. And yet, for those who've watched the evolution of William and Catherine closely, the shock is only on the surface. Insiders revealed that Catherine, graceful, composed, ever the steady presence, was indeed taken aback by the speed of the plan, but not by the sentiment behind it. William had grown distant from the traditions he once upheld with unflinching loyalty. The loss of his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II, had torn something inside him, something the crown itself failed to mend. And in that void, Catherine stepped in, not merely as a partner, but as the one true constant who understood both his pain and his vision. This wasn't about titles, it was about legacy. William wasn't rushing to place a crown on Catherine's head out of whimsy or arrogance. It was symbolic, a declaration that the future of the monarchy needed to reflect love, unity, and above all, purpose. In private letters intercepted by royal aides, William reportedly described Catherine not as his future queen, but as the soul of the monarchy reborn. The words rattled royal insiders. What did it mean for King Charles, still adjusting to his own reign? What did it mean for the constitutional stability of the monarchy? Would this radical move fracture the institution, or save it? As the plan leaked, whispers became tremors. Senior palace staff, once confidants of William, found themselves scrambling to contain a narrative, spiraling out of control. And yet, behind closed doors, William stood resolute. He wasn't seeking approval. He was seeking transformation. And Catherine, poised but no longer passive, stood beside him. The crown, once a burden passed from hand to hand, now hung in the balance of a love story threatening to rewrite its rules. But to understand why William would, to make such a seismic move, we must go back to a moment of pain that shattered his loyalty to the royal playbook forever. Not every betrayal leaves blood on the floor, some bleed quietly, behind closed palace doors. William once believed in the crown with near religious devotion, until the institution failed him when he needed it most. The death of Queen Elizabeth II was more than the loss of a sovereign, it was the collapse of a personal pillar in William's life. To the world, she was a monarch. To William, she was the last keeper of his mother's memory, the only remaining figure who had steadied the monarchy through scandal, grief, and generational wounds. When she passed, something shifted. The air inside the palace changed. And for William, who had spent decades preparing to one day wear the crown, the dream suddenly felt hollow. The traditions that once comforted him now rang with a cruel emptiness. The ceremonies, the titles, the reverence, they meant nothing without her guiding presence. And in her absence, the throne he was set to inherit seemed less like a symbol of duty and more like a trap. Charles's ascension did not soothe the fracture. Instead, it deepened it. Behind the public smiles and stiff choreography of succession, William wrestled with emotions no one dared name aloud. There was pride for his father. Yes, but there was also a gnawing disquiet. Whispers within the palace walls tell of a private confrontation between father and son mere days after the funeral. William, still raw with grief, reportedly challenged the new king behind closed doors, not with rage, but with sorrow. "We can't lead them with empty rituals anymore," he said. Charles, never one to yield, replied with a cold reminder. "Tradition is the monarchy." It was a conversation that ended not with reconciliation, but silence. And in that silence, Catherine stepped in not just as a wife, but as a mirror to William's turmoil. She had seen this version of him, before burdened by expectation, stretched between duty and instinct. But this time was different. This time, he didn't want comforting. He wanted clarity, and Catherine, ever intuitive, offered both. It was in those long, hushed nights after the Queen's passing that William began voicing ideas he'd never dared speak aloud. He questioned the very system he was born to uphold. He wondered aloud whether loyalty to the institution had blinded him to its flaws. He asked Catherine, "What if the monarchy we were meant to serve no longer serves the people?" It was during one of those conversations, when the weight of legacy pressed against his chest like iron, that he whispered the words that would define everything to come. "The monarchy must evolve, or it will fall." That wasn't defiance, it was a revelation, a prophecy. And though no advisors were present, no aides took note, that night marked the true beginning. The seeds of rebellion weren't planted in a grand speech or televised appearance. They were planted in pain. Quiet, devastating, irreversible pain. And while William's doubts grew silently, Catherine's influence on him began to shift from supportive to strategic. She has the poise, the grace, the public love, but no official crown. Behind palace walls, Catherine has long walked the line between silent strength and suppressed ambition. But lately, her silence has cracked. For years, the public has seen her as the embodiment of modern royalty, a serene presence in chaotic times, a woman who bore the unbearable pressures of royal life with elegance and restraint. Crowds would cheer her name as if she were already queen. Tabloids crowned her in headlines long before any palace did. In the eyes of millions, Catherine wasn't waiting for a crown. She had already earned one. But inside the institution, reality told a different story. She was still the Duchess, still deferring, still one breath away from the throne, and yet eternally kept at arm's length from its power. Her journey had not been gentle. She had given up a life of anonymity, sacrificed privacy, endured scrutiny so invasive it carved scars no headline would ever reveal. Every outfit, every glance, every word had been dissected under a microscope sharpened by expectation. And through it all, she had smiled. She had played her part, but with each passing year, the cost of silence became harder to bear. Privately, aides say Catherine began to withdraw not from duty, but from deference. The woman who once merely endured the monarchy had begun to challenge it. There were subtle shifts, first noticed during royal engagements. Catherine's schedule grew heavier. Her causes, mental health, early childhood development, women's welfare became central, not secondary. She no longer stood behind William, she stood beside him. And then, without announcement or fanfare, she began to command her own stage. During visits, crowds began to chant her name first. Diplomats sought her presence. Commonwealth leaders asked for her insights, not just pleasantries. And still, the institution gave her no title beyond Duchess. It was as if the walls of tradition refused to acknowledge what the world already knew. But inside those same walls, something else simmered. Catherine's reported discomfort with Camilla's title as Queen Consort did not go unnoticed. Friends close to the couple spoke of quiet conversations, tense, reflective, where Catherine wrestled with what it meant to serve a system that held her back. She had never spoken against Camilla publicly, but privately, the title cut deeper than expected. In hushed tones with William, she began to ask the questions she'd buried for years. When do I stop waiting? Why must I earn what others inherit? Her voice, once measured and reserved, began to tremble with conviction. And William listened, not as a prince bound by rules, but as a husband who had watched his wife give everything to a machine that gave so little in return. He saw her evolve not into someone different, but into the woman she had always been, finally unveiled. Her strength was no longer quiet, it was strategic. Her ambition wasn't loud, but it was now undeniable. And perhaps, most importantly, it gave William the permission he needed to confront what he had feared all along: that the monarchy, in its current form, was built to preserve power, not share it. And as Catherine's confidence blossomed, William's disillusionment hardened, leading to a fateful decision cloaked in secrecy. They thought they could keep it hidden, but behind the scenes, a small group of William's most trusted allies were shaping something that could fracture the monarchy, a roadmap to make Catherine queen early without waiting for a coronation. It began with a conversation, one that was never supposed to leave the private chambers of Kensington Palace. But it didn't end there. William, now emboldened by conviction and Catherine's rising influence, gathered what palace insiders would later call the Inner Four, a secretive circle of advisors sworn not just to William, but to a vision. Among them, a former aide who once served Diana, a constitutional scholar with deep ties to the Church of England, a trusted legal strategist, and a retired diplomat with intimate knowledge of Commonwealth politics. Together, they weren't planning a coup. They were drafting history. They met in silence. No official records, no aides allowed. Just dimly lit rooms in Kensington and Windsor, guarded by routine and protected by decades of loyalty. It was there that they began exploring the unthinkable. Could a consort be elevated to co-monarch in symbolic stature while the reigning king was still alive? Could a new path be forged, not by law, but by public will and moral right? Legal texts were combed. Precedents from the 16th century were revived. Lines were blurred between ceremony and power. William wanted Catherine recognized now, not after death, not after delay, not as a queen in waiting, but as a monarch of meaning. At the heart of it was not power, but purpose. That's how William justified it. "This is not a coup," he told one member of the circle during a tense midnight discussion. "It's a correction. A correction of a lineage that had ignored the soul of the people. A correction of a system that favored hierarchy over humanity. But the path forward wasn't just legal, it was global. And that's where the plan deepened. Memos, short, encrypted, and ominously vague, began circulating between select embassies. Messages directed not through official foreign channels, but through personal backdoors, old friendships, whispered favors. William needed to know how the Commonwealth would respond if Catherine were named queen by declaration, not death. Then came the unexpected twist. An overseas dignitary with connections to both London and the Caribbean offered quiet support, not recognition, but encouragement. The Commonwealth had grown restless. The symbolic power of a fresh, beloved queen was not unwelcome. In private letters, it was said that William began outlining a vision of a dual crown, one that reflected not just bloodlines, but bond. And through it all, Catherine was kept informed, but never involved. It was William's burden to bear, and his alone. But power, even in planning, is never invisible. And though their circle was tight and their moves calculated, the winds of suspicion began to stir beyond palace walls. Because no matter how carefully William planned it, one person he couldn't outrun was his own father. When the king learned of his son's secret plans, the walls of Buckingham trembled. Charles, blindsided and betrayed, now faced the unthinkable. A rebellion from within his bloodline. The revelation didn't arrive with ceremony, it came, crashing in like a storm. Sources say a single intercepted document, passed hand to hand through loyal palace staff, landed on Charles's desk with the weight of a declaration. Its contents were damning. References to symbolic succession, subtle endorsements from foreign envoys, and most brazenly language framing Catherine as a reigning moral monarch. At first, the king dismissed it as a misunderstanding, but a late-night phone call, leaked to a senior aide, confirmed the truth. William wasn't floating ideas, he was preparing for action. The confrontation was swift, brutal, and unrecorded. Father and son, once bound by shared grief, now collided in a locked room at Clarence House. No cameras, no transcripts, only the sound of raised voices and shattered loyalties. Charles demanded answers. William, unshaken, gave none. When pressed, he simply repeated, "This isn't treason, it's transformation." Those within earshot described it as a shouting match that spilled into a chilling silence. Charles, seething, issued what insiders now call the ultimatum: stand down or step aside. There was no fatherly warmth left, only the voice of a king defending his crown from his heir. Queen Camilla, long regarded as the monarch's fiercest guardian, played a role that few dared speak of aloud. Some believe she urged Charles to act quickly to cut off the rebellion before it took root. Others whisper she pushed for the crown to be publicly reinforced through official ceremonies and aggressive PR, highlighting Charles's rightful place. Whatever her influence, it was clear she would not stand idly by as Catherine was elevated by public momentum. She had fought too hard for her own acceptance to see it undermined now. Behind the gilded doors of the Privy Council, the king's inner circle began to mobilize. Loyalists drafted statements denying any plans of early succession. Lawyers were consulted. Old constitutional clauses were dusted off like loaded weapons. The goal was clear: shut it down, contain the narrative, and isolate William before his actions gained legitimacy. But containment, as they would soon learn, was a fantasy. The once private rift now seeped into public view. Body language during appearances grew colder. Royal photographers captured the distance. Even when words remained measured, journalists, reading between the silences, began publishing damning analyses. Father and son had become adversaries in a palace built on legacy. And yet, as Charles summoned his authority and wielded it like a blade, something unexpected was stirring far beyond palace gates. The people were watching, not as passive subjects, but as witnesses, and they were speaking not in whispers, but in waves. Because while Charles fought to keep control, the public was already choosing sides, and what they wanted shocked the palace. They lined the streets not for a king, but for a future queen. As rumours spread of William's plan, something remarkable happened. The people responded, and they weren't asking permission. It started with a whisper online. Then it became a wave. And within days, it was a global storm. Hashtags surged, timelines flooded, and a single phrase began to echo louder than any royal proclamation: number, crown Catherine. It wasn't orchestrated by PR firms or palace aides, it was organic, raw, and emotional. Catherine wasn't being crowned by decree. She was being crowned by devotion. One leaked image, Catherine exiting a closed-door meeting in a regal tiara, expression unreadable, became the spark. Within hours, it was the most shared photo in royal history, and the message it sent was unmistakable. The people had chosen their queen. The shift wasn't limited to Britain. Across Commonwealth nations, citizens took to the streets and social platforms alike, expressing not just admiration but allegiance. For many, Catherine symbolized everything the monarchy had failed to become: compassionate, modern, unifying. In places where the crown had become a symbol of colonial weight, she now emerged as a vision of renewal. In Australia, in Canada, in New Zealand, the murmurs weren't about abolishing the monarchy, but about who should truly represent it. What stunned the palace even more was the absence of outrage. In fact, comparisons began surfacing, daring ones. Historians and commentators recalled Edward VIII, who abandoned the throne for love, sparking a constitutional crisis. But William wasn't abandoning the crown. He was redefining it. And instead of scandal, there was sincerity. Instead of exile, there was exaltation. The very thing that once tore the monarchy apart, love, was now becoming the force that could unite it. Private polls conducted within days of the media surge delivered a devastating truth to Buckingham. Catherine's approval ratings had eclipsed those of Charles by a margin not seen in decades. The people weren't just watching, they were taking sides. And their message was simple: they wanted a monarchy that reflected their values. Catherine's rise wasn't built on privilege. It was earned in silence, sacrifice, and service. And now, it was time to honor that sacrifice. For William, This was more than validation. It was direction. Parliament might stall, the Crown might resist, but the people, his people, were ready. William saw a new path forward, not carved through law, but through legitimacy, not through titles, but through trust. And with every chant of Queen Catherine outside palace gates, he moved one step closer to declaring what the world already felt in their hearts. But every revolution has its price, and William was about to discover how deep the Crown's roots of resistance truly go. For centuries, the monarchy has outlasted scandal, war, and treachery by knowing when to silence rebellion. As William pushed forward, the institution he once trusted turned cold, calculating, and ruthless. What began as a quiet power shift soon ignited a full-blown siege. The Crown, threatened not by an outside enemy but by its own heir, launched its oldest defense. Character destruction wrapped in royal discretion. Suddenly, stories began appearing in select papers, none official, none traceable, but all insidiously familiar. Whispers of Catherine's private frustrations, her influence over William's judgment, and her growing hunger for power painted a portrait far removed from the people's queen. These weren't journalistic accidents. They were coordinated strikes from within, leaks designed to fracture the image of unity and tarnish the figure the public had rallied behind. The press offices of the palace, long masters of narrative control, began steering headlines with surgical precision. Photos of Catherine were carefully chosen to portray detachment. Quotes were clipped to sound cold. Her grace became aloofness. Her resolve, ambition. At the same time, financial watchdogs suddenly turned their gaze toward William's charitable foundations. Foundations that had operated without issue for years were now being probed for irregularities. The message was clear. If William wanted to rewrite the rules, the system would strip him of everything he used to do it. And then, in a twist as painful as it was predictable, the fracture between William and Harry widened once again. What had once been a cold distance turned into a sharp divide. Behind the scenes, William believed Harry had been approached, possibly warned by palace insiders. His recent statements to the press, vague but pointed, seemed to distance himself from the constitutional chaos unfolding back home. William, already burdened by betrayal, now faced the possibility that his own brother, once his shield in youth, might side with the very establishment that silenced their mother. That pain reopened wounds not yet healed, and this time, there would be no olive branch extended. Amid the chaos, MI5 was said to have issued a quiet warning to Downing Street. The brief, classified and carefully worded, raised concerns about national confidence and monarchical instability. It didn't name William. It didn't need to. The implications were chilling. The monarchy wasn't just defending tradition, it was preparing to protect it at any cost. As William stood at the center of this storm, he began to recognize the eerie parallels. The isolation, the calculated whispers, the mounting pressure. For the first time in his life, he understood what Diana must have felt. The system she fought now turned on him. But unlike Diana, William wasn't just surviving the institution, he was challenging it head-on. And despite the backlash, despite the betrayal, despite the cost, it wasn't over. Because he knew that if he stepped back now, it would all vanish. Every hope, every sacrifice, every dream of Catherine finally ascending to her rightful place. The war for the crown was no longer symbolic. It was real, and it demanded a final act of defiance. Cornered and under siege, William made a final gamble, one that would either secure Catherine's crown or destroy everything. It wasn't a coronation, not officially, but to the world, it was everything. In a shocking televised appearance, William made his move, and Catherine stood by his side, not as a duchess, but as a queen. The broadcast came without warning. No palace press release, no royal seal, no government endorsement, just a live stream, quietly announced through William's official channels, and within minutes, the world was watching. The setting was understated, but the message thundered through every screen. This was no longer about tradition. It was about transformation. William stood tall, his voice steady, his presence deliberate. And beside him, radiant with resolve, was Catherine, wearing not the crown of a consort, but the historic coronet of Queen Elizabeth I, a deliberate and powerful symbol of a monarch who redefined what it meant to rule without a king. The ceremony was symbolic, yes, but it was not performative. It was a line drawn in gold and fire. William's speech was brief but unforgettable. He didn't seek to abolish the past, he demanded the future acknowledge the present. The monarchy must serve its people, not wait for their permission, he declared. The future cannot wait for the past to catch up. His words echoed through households, newsrooms, and parliaments. And then Catherine stepped forward. Her speech, crafted in collaboration with her most trusted advisors, was measured, graceful, and unshakably clear. She did not claim a title. She did not issue demands. Instead, she offered something far more dangerous to the establishment. Legitimacy born not from lineage, but from love, sacrifice, and service. Within minutes of the stream ending, reactions exploded. Some cried tears of joy, declaring the dawn of a new royal age. Others condemned the move as a constitutional crisis disguised in sentiment. But the palace said nothing. Not a statement, not a denial, just silence. And in that silence, speculation roared. Had Charles been warned? Was this an agreed-upon gesture, or a public challenge? Reporters camped outside palace gates for answers that never came. Parliament, blindsided and boiling, was forced into emergency session to determine what, if anything, could be done. But how do you undo something that was never illegal, only unprecedented? Royal historians were divided. Some called it treason, others hailed it as genius. But the people? They saw what they had already believed in their hearts. Catherine was their queen. Not because a crown was placed on her head, but because a man who would be king risked everything to show her she already wore one. And in doing so, he rewrote the story of the monarchy in a single, seismic hour. But as the world watched with breathless awe, behind palace doors, a final confrontation was brewing. Two men, one monarchy, a kingdom teetering between tradition and transformation. In the final hours of this royal power struggle, the question was no longer if the monarchy would change, but how much blood would be left on the red carpet. The last meeting between Charles and William was not held in public, but its impact rippled like thunder across the palace walls. Sources close to the family described it as cold, terse, and devoid of reconciliation. The two stood not as father and son, but as rivals. William, emboldened by public support and moral conviction, made no apologies. Charles, cornered by an evolving world he no longer controlled, offered no compromise. There were no raised voices this time, just an unnerving silence. And in that silence, decades of buried tensions erupted into something irreversible. Neither man yielded, neither man bowed. They simply walked away, knowing that only one could shape what came next. What followed shocked even those closest to the Queen Consort. Without warning, Camilla withdrew from public duties. No statement, no farewell appearance, just a quiet disappearance from the royal calendar. Some claimed it was illness, others whispered it was protest. But insiders suspected the truth ran deeper. The toll of standing at Charles's side, of defending a crown now slipping through their grasp, had left her spent and possibly unwilling to continue in a monarchy tearing itself apart from the inside. Her absence was not just a void, it was a message. As the dust settled from William and Catherine's symbolic crowning, the Commonwealth itself began to fracture. Nations that once spoke in harmony suddenly stood divided. Canada's Prime Minister offered warm congratulations to Catherine, calling her a symbol of modern strength. Australia remained silent. Caribbean leaders began pushing for referendums with renewed urgency, not because of William's act, but because of what it revealed. A monarchy still trapped between past and future, unable to speak in one voice. Meanwhile, royal historians, those who once dismissed such a scenario as fiction, began writing a new chapter. They called it the Catherine transition. Not a formal succession, not a constitutional crisis, but a cultural revolution. A passing of symbolic power, not sanctioned by tradition, but by people. And with it came a question that shook the entire institution. Had William, without a crown, already rewritten the rules of kingship? The monarchy now hung in limbo between legal procedure and public sentiment, between symbolism and statute. Parliament debated. The Privy Council delayed. The palace stood still. And yet, the world kept moving. Catherine's image remained on front pages. William's speech was quoted in classrooms and council halls. And the old guard, once certain of their grip, watched as history slipped from their hands like sand. Was this the beginning of a new golden age? A monarchy reborn through empathy, boldness, and love? Or was this the last breath of a dying crown, fractured, divided, too far gone to reclaim its former glory? That question remains unanswered. Because in royal history, no crown is ever truly secure, and this time, it might be love that brings the throne to its knees. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.